The governor touts another budget surplus and plots more tax cuts. Medical marijuana makes the November ballot. Michael Poore charts a new course for Little Rock schools, and Hillary beats the rap. But can she beat the Donald? Arkansas Week is next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
This is Arkansas Week.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Arkansas Week. I'm Lance Turner of Arkansas Business. And the state of the state budget, surpluses and tax cuts and all points in between, is where we begin tonight. Joining us on the program from the Little Rock NPR affiliate, KUAR-FM 89.1, News Director Michael Hiblin. From the pages of Talk Business and Politics, reporter and columnist Steve Bronner. And from the Department of Political Science at Ouachita Baptist University in Arkadelphia, Hal Bass. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in tonight. It was a holiday week, but a good week for Asa Hutchinson, who got back to work on Tuesday to talk about the state's financial picture and, based on that, share some hints about what he'll be looking for in the next year's legislative session, which is namely more tax cuts. Michael, the governor, holding a news conference on Tuesday to tout another budget surplus.
Yeah, we got the revenue report for June, the final year of the fiscal year. And all total, we came out with a surplus of $117 million. So the governor very happy about that. Net available revenue for the year totaled $5.3 billion. That's about $117 million higher than the previous year. Still about, with gross general revenue down about 3%. But still, this gives the governor some extra money. He said he does want tax cuts to be considered by the legislature when it meets next year, mainly to income taxes. Said they might not be all implemented at once, maybe phased in, but he does want to expand income tax cuts. He also said he wants to put some of this money aside. Noted that the economy really has been doing well. There's going to be an eventual slowdown. Right now we've got unemployment 3.8% was the most recent report. Said we're going to eventually face some bumps and we need to put some money aside for the eventual slowdown that he says is bound to occur, and when you don't know what other expenses could pop up. But the governor overall, as you said, very excited.
And those who look for a dark cloud, the silver lining here, are going to point to some of the ways in which the expenditures have been kept down. Right. That might be, in the long run, detrimental to the state's interest here. Things like no raises for state employees, a flat higher education budget, no work on prisons, things like that.
That seemed to be a bone of, or a known of the Hutchinson administration. That's the criticism that's out there. If you are going to criticize a budget surplus, is exactly how we got there. And he did try to answer that criticism during that news conference on Tuesday, Steve.
Right, and he says, we have had conservative budgeting that has and a history of doing that. Of course, part of the way that we've been able to do these kinds of things is that we've been getting a lot of federal dollars for different projects. That didn't come up in the news conference, but that's part of how we've had surpluses. He did talk about the fact that we've been able to cut down the backlog of inmates in county jails, and by doing so, maybe we won't have to spend a lot of money for increasing prison spaces. But by and large, a good report.
But Democrats and maybe even some Republicans have been a little bit suspect of the surplus, and of course now they'll be fighting over what to do with it in the coming session. And so, among the things that are on the table, I suppose highways is always the evergreen item, and highways has been the place where he has gone to the reserve. And there's been signals in recent weeks that highways again will become a topic. Yeah,
the pressure to put more money toward highways and find new ways to address the shortfall in highway funding has been a key issue for the governor that he wants to address and is going to be in his mind as he looks at where money will be going.
And he's basically asking the highway constituency to come up with some suggestions that he can take into account.
And anything would have to be revenue neutral. I mean, he's made that very clear. If we raise money for highways, something else has to be cut. He does not want more money coming into the government from state taxpayers. There's we're looking for some suggestions from highway supporters. But at this point, what he has said is that if there's going to be a tax increase for highways, it has to come as a result of a voter-initiated act. It won't come. He won't lead the charge.
One place we know extra money will not be going is prisons, and he seemed fairly emphatic about that. Prisons was something that we were quite worried about this time last year, but at this point, at least, he seems confident that we don't need extra beds.
Well, the county jail backlog has gone from 3,000 to 1,000. We've expanded some prison space. We've sent a bunch of them down to Texas, and I think that there was some reforms that were put in place immediately after some one incident or one terrible convicted felon on parole who committed some very heinous acts, and there was a response to that, and now that has a little bit in the rearview mirror. There hasn't the situation has stabilized enough that the idea of building a huge $100 million prison probably is not on the table at the moment.
When we get back to tax cuts, though, what's the prime piece of cuts that the governor is really sort of eyeing and looking to do?
Income taxes, that's the key thing. He said that previous cuts have been part of what has helped put us where we are now. And that's really where he's wanting to see more cuts considered.
And a lot of states outside Arkansas or adjoining Arkansas do not have income taxes. And he is saying that he is hearing from industry that is a reason why, that is a big mark against Arkansas, that income tax that we have is enough that makes them choose somewhere else to go.
Always the economic development argument about
Right.
about keeping taxes low, Hal.
Yes. And he, as Steve indicated, it's the competitive situation Arkansas finds itself in seeking employers coming to the state.
Moving on, that was not the only subject of that news conference on Tuesday as the governor returns from the holiday weekend, also previewing a trip to Europe, another economic development trip to Europe, his second, but not his. He's got a portfolio of trips that he's been on across the globe. This time he's headed back to Europe, Steve.
And to another air show, this one in London, the Farnborough International Air Show. People don't think about that, but aerospace is actually Arkansas's #1 export. So the idea of trying to woo and lure aerospace companies at this humongous air show is something that would be very much on his radar. After that, he's going to Berlin to open up Arkansas's 3rd international office. We have one in Japan and one in China. We'll have one in Berlin for the entire European continent. Germany is the largest foreign partner that we have as far as having a presence in Arkansas, but this office will be working throughout the whole continent.
And with the aerospace companies, there are plans to meet with about 20 of them. Most already have a presence in Arkansas, but the Economic Development Commission had said they wanted to meet with them and find out about any impediments they might be facing. What could the state do to make the situation in Arkansas even more appealing for them? Really try to find a way to nurture that industry, and if they can try to get some new businesses to come into the state, that too would be great.
While these plans were no doubt in place before the Brexit vote, certainly that vote does make the German connection and the continental connection a little more central to Arkansas's future prospects for attracting international investment.
Different governors do things in different ways, but it seems, at least outwardly, in terms of, we see a lot of these trips taking place in the last 2 years of Governor Hutchinson's, or the first 2 years of Governor Hutchinson's administration. Is there the sense or the realization that they are indeed more aggressive in terms of selling Arkansas, at least in a more international way than perhaps we've seen previously?
They better be. This is, I think I read this was a trip was going to cost $70,000. No one's complaining about that. This is what governors do now. They are the ambassador. They are a salesman for the state. If they're not, then I think, as Mike Preston said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And he's the AEDC commissioner, executive director. So this is something that governors do, and no one questions it anymore.
Yeah. A big entourage, though. It's just like his trip to Cuba. You know, he and many other officials traveling over. They're traveling over this weekend. But I think it makes a difference, or at least the governor feels it makes a significant difference for him to be a part of these trips and not just send representatives of him.
Right.
And the Arkansas Economic Development Foundation is providing some supplemental support. So it's not all on the taxpayer's dime.
Right. Moving on to something else, there will likely be a parade of boxes and carts heading into the Secretary of State's office today. The deadline for people to file signatures for ballot measures. We've several contenders this year across an array of issues making the rounds, and at least one certified yesterday, Michael. One already on the ballot, that's medical marijuana.
Yeah, they had delivered box loads to the Secretary of State's office about 2 weeks ago and got word on Thursday that they did meet the threshold, had 77,516 valid signatures, about 10,000 more than they needed. It's one of two medical marijuana proposals in the works right now. The backer of this one, the group Arkansans for Compassionate Care, the woman leading this campaign, Melissa Fultz, made the argument that if the other medical marijuana proposal makes it onto the ballot, and as we record this Friday morning, we don't know yet whether or not those signatures will be turned in, but she suggested if both medical marijuana proposals are on the ballot, that both are likely to fail. She said it would create confusion, so she's been calling on David Couch, who is this other proposal, to halt his efforts. He has said in the past that no, he's not going to stop his efforts on this. You've then got a third one, recreational marijuana proposal that's also been out collecting signatures, and we'll find out if they do indeed get enough to make it onto the ballot. But this first one definitely will be on, and it was 4 years ago that Arkansas narrowly turned down a proposal. It was beaten 51 to 48%. Very close, and we'll see if any minds have been changed since then.
Well, we have had some polling, I think, that has indicated what, Steve, in terms of medical marijuana?
Well, Talk Business polls showed, not long ago, showed that it has big support, like 58% said that they would support it. Now that's before you have it on the ballot, and before you've had television commercials, and before you've had activists against it, but at the moment, it would seem to have momentum in the right direction.
There has been an evolution on that issue, it seems.
Yes, but there is substantial opposition out there, including the governor and social conservatives, who can be counted on, I think, to at least try to stem that public opinion tide going forward. There is a procedural distinction between the proposals that are coming forward. One is going the constitutional amendment route, and one's going the initiated act route. So, and the one that's already on the ballot is the initiated act one.
And what does that mean in terms of how they're likely to fare, or indicating?
Well, in terms of getting there, there's a higher standard for petitions, for signatures on the constitutional amendment. But the effect would be essentially a stronger legal measure if it were embedded in the Constitution as opposed to simply an initiated act.
But there is a challenge. At least the Family Council says that it is going to have members going through every one of these signatures, verifying it on their own, beyond what the Secretary of State's office has done, and has suggested this really isn't about medicine, that anyone can very easily, for just a little pain or nausea, if they can get a note from their doctor, not even a prescription, it doesn't come through a pharmacy, but if they can get a note from their doctor, they can get it through these dispensaries. And this proposal allows people who live more than 20 miles from a dispensary to grow it on their own. David Couch pretty much relies on businesses selling this. So there is
growing your own has made people uncomfortable.
That has. And you also had the governor saying, well, if this is really medicine, then we need to let the medical community debate the merits of it. And he had his Surgeon General out on Thursday saying that if this is truly medicine, that there ought to be ways for the pharmaceutical industry to handle this the way you traditionally do with medications.
Right.
There's a larger point here, though, that we're looking at essentially a crowded ballot on the direct democracy front, wherein the voters make policy decisions as opposed to relying on representatives to do that.
And what is that a symptom of, do we think?
Well, it's a symptom of a lack of trust in elites. It's also a symptom of the Arkansas political culture that has long valued populist sentiment here. But we're looking at several ballot measures, some referred by the legislature, again, some coming to us through these signature initiatives here.
Speaking of the crowded ballot, we've got other things that are aiming to make the ballot. And what are the? Can you give us a brief outline of the other thing? We've got stuff on nursing home, or we've got stuff on healthcare lawsuits, rather, and we also got casinos as well.
That's right. One measure would allow 3 casinos to be built in Arkansas. There would be basically a constitutional monopoly embedded in the Constitution.
Writing in the name of a private company into the state constitution.
Right, and who owns that private company. So pretty good deal for those folks if they can get it. But that's one proposal. Another would limit medical malpractice awards and limit attorneys' contingency fees. Both of those have backing of money, which is why they have a good chance of making the ballot. People stand a chance to profit, and so there are or to lose less money in the case of the medical one. So they will likely get on the ballot. One that did not have the backing of big dollars, but probably had some popular support, was a term limits amendment, and it announced yesterday that it will not be on the ballot. They did not collect enough signatures.
That was Restore Term Limits. That's the group, and wonder why we couldn't get that done, Michael.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know a whole lot on that. I know we did at KUAR speak with the casino backers, and they said absolutely they're going to have enough signatures. We haven't seen any turned in yet as we record this, but they are confident that they'll have enough to at least meet the initial threshold, and then if they're short but close enough, the Secretary of State's office gives people another 30 days.
I think a couple of things on the term limits deal. Part of it is there's only so much oxygen out there in the political atmosphere, and these other initiatives or proposals seem to have sucked up most of the action. And we did have kind of a term limits issue in the previous cycle, and maybe that exhausted the energy for it for the time being.
All right, moving on to energy and the need for new energy in the Little Rock School District. Superintendent Michael Poore making his first sort of big policy speech since ascending as the leader of the school district last week. Spoke at the Clinton School of Public Service. A lot of eyes on the former Bentonville superintendent for all the obvious reasons. Steve, how did he do in front of that Clinton School crowd?
Well, people aren't marching in the streets about him yet.
Okay.
So apparently he did okay in that speech. He has said that the Little Rock School District needs reforms. There's been structural reforms under the previous superintendent, Baker Curris. Mike Poore is talking more about academic reforms. That's why he was brought in. He is more of an academic. Baker Curris is more of an organizational expert. And so Mr. Poore is talking about things like career development centers, ways to more pre-kindergarten classes, using the charter school process to help Little Rock become more creative and innovative. This is happening across the state. Many districts are doing some actually really amazing things. School is not the same as what we went to in a lot of districts. In many places, children have a much different experience than what we had. Little Rock has not taken advantage of some of the opportunities. To many people, charter schools is a dirty word, but there are several types of charter schools, and one of them is one that a school district itself can get. It can get its own charter and be very innovative in how it does things, and Little Rock has not taken advantage of that. At the same time that that's not happened, Little Rock has lost students, especially in middle school. Its graduation rate has gone down at the same time that the graduation rate in other parts of the state has gone up. So Mr. Poore has some challenges ahead. He did seem to speak with a lot of passion, and he is going to need that because there is a lot of passion right now in the district, especially among those who are still angry about the fact that the state has taken over the district and they want it back.
Is he going to get any kind of honeymoon at all coming into this job? Do we have a sense of any kind of goodwill that he's going to get, because of all of the controversy in terms of him being installed? Mike, do we have any idea?
Yeah, I doubt it, because there are a lot of people who aren't happy about the way he was brought in. A lot of people had grown to like Baker Curris, so for the governor's education commissioner, Johnny Key, to take him out and just decide, I'm going to put in someone new, that aroused a lot of suspicion. But local control is the key issue, and he suggested during his speech that the things that he's proposing are ways that the Little Rock School District can regain local control.
And he's kind of signaling, and if you can't beat them, join them approach with regard to the charter schools, not in the sense of a wholehearted embrace of charter schools, but adapting some of the techniques and procedures of the charter schools and taking advantage of some authorizations the legislature provided to the state education system to, as Steve suggests, kind of change the template for doing school in the state.
And very briefly, Baker Curris had no honeymoon either when he started, and he made his own honeymoon. So maybe Mike Poore can do the same.
Right. Moving on to, I can't find a metaphor to go honeymoon into the presidential election, because there's nothing, doesn't seem to be there's much there to laugh about. But I'm sure we'll find something. Donald Trump. Again, the topic of a radio interview with our governor, Asa Hutchinson, a national public radio interview, or NPR rather, interview with Asa Hutchinson yesterday. Just his thoughts on Donald Trump as a candidate, and his support of Donald Trump as a candidate continues to fascinate me, at least, and probably some others, Michael.
Yeah, and clearly it must be fascinating for NPR, because this is the third time they've brought him on to be interviewed by Robert Siegel on All Things Considered to a national audience. First time it was the governor backing the former governor, Mike Huckabee, in his race, then Marco Rubio. And in those two previous interviews was very critical of Donald Trump, called his words scary. Now he's working to make the case for Donald Trump. Even said, and I wrote out the quote, "Just because my quarterback didn't get selected by the coach, I'm not going to stop blocking for the team." And said that Donald Trump would still be much better than Hillary Clinton. Said he has met with Donald Trump, has expressed concerns and that they have differences, but that he will be in Cleveland in a few weeks at the Republican convention, part of the Arkansas delegation, and just thinks he would be much better than Hillary Clinton.
A couple of things about this. Hutchinson is at heart a party loyalist. He's born and bred in the Arkansas Republican Party. And what this particular decision to get behind Trump or get on the Trump bandwagon suggests to me is a couple of things. One, I think identity trumps ideology, because clearly Hutchinson's Republican principles are at odds with many of the positions that Trump is advocating, but his party loyalty is going to outweigh the ideological rigor of, in this case, Hutchinson's brand of conservatism. And the second is this, Michael suggested, the negative partisanship part of this equation. It's not that he's as strong for Trump as he is antagonistic toward Hillary Clinton and insisting that Trump is the only way Republicans can hope to beat Hillary.
That seems to be what we hear out of the congressional delegation as well, from most of them anyway, in terms of Arkansas's congressional delegation and their impressions of Trump, Steve.
They seem to be trying to warm up to him. Not all have succeeded. They met with him yesterday and came out, all of them released statements indicating that at least we went reasonably well, except for Representative French Hill, who did not release a statement. Senator Cotton was on Meet the Press last week. He's been talked about as a potential vice presidential candidate. Didn't sound like one on Meet the Press. Asked to defend Trump, he attacked Hillary. And asked again to defend Trump, he said, "I'll let Trump defend himself."
Right. Well,
the job of a vice president is to make the case for the nominee. Doesn't sound like Senator Cotton is on his way to being then the vice president. But they're doing. I think that the opposition to Hillary unites them all. and eventually that they'll get there.
Speaking of Hillary, she had, I think by some respects, a pretty decent week. The FBI probe has come to an end. Careless but not criminal, I believe, is what they said about her use of email.
Right. No charges being filed, but Republicans clearly wanted to make a case out of the statements that came from the head of the FBI, who was very critical about her conduct. And you saw some montages of clips from Hillary Clinton a year ago and what the FBI director said. And Hillary Clinton didn't come out looking very good, but still no charges filed. And at this stage in the game, it's probably not going to change any minds. Anyone who already didn't like Hillary Clinton, or anyone who liked Hillary Clinton probably isn't going to be swayed by this.
Final thought?
Yeah, I
Al?
think polarization has essentially generated some alternative views of reality that are very much on display this week through one set of prescription lens.
Right.
What you have here is a rigged system that allows Hillary to get off the hook despite her self-evident guilt. An alternative view, mistakes are not by definition crimes, and what we're seeing here is a partisan overreach and a witch hunt. I think the larger point from a civic perspective is an increasing reliance in our polity to avoid relying on elections to decide outcomes, and looking instead to investigations and prosecutions and revelations and the like. And I think that's not in the better interest of our system.
And we will have to leave it there. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming in. We appreciate it as always. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.